Welcome, and thank you for your interest in bringing the Conversation Project and our resources into your community. I'm Patty Webster, and I'll be your guide over the next hour or so to help you feel comfortable in running a conversation starter workshop, either in person or virtually, for those in your personal or social circles, work settings, or your wider community. A quick overview of this training. I'll introduce you to the free ready-made resources we have for you to use, adapt, or pull from when hosting a conversation starter workshop. One of these resources is a standard slide deck that you can use as you wish. I'll run through those slides today to touch on key points we make and what we've learned from running many events over the years. Lastly, I'll guide you to our support network for any questions you may have and to connect with many others like you who are bringing the Conversation Project to where people live, work, pray, and learn. We've worked with thousands of groups over the years, and this is just a sampling of what we're seeing. In the Live bucket, we've seen local leaders, retired or practicing clinicians or financial planners, bring the Conversation Project to existing groups, whether it be a book club, Rotary Club, area on aging or senior center meeting. These folks are either sharing resources or training additional community members to help them spread the word. In the work bucket, we have a lot of employers who are taking this to their own staff through brown bag lunches, new hire orientations, or as part of onboarding to help support their employees to plan ahead. In the pray bucket, we see many congregations and places of worship who are taking this on, as many individuals of strong faith are often more comfortable talking with their faith leaders or faith community members before talking with doctors or families about their wishes. And lastly, in the learn bucket, we have a huge growing interest in reaching students from high school to grad school to continuing education for adults and retirees. We've seen a large uptick in younger audiences searching for information on our website and professors interested in teaching this in their coursework to help prepare the next generation. Our youth do not shy away from this topic and, in fact, are some of our best advocates to help jumpstart intergenerational conversations. We have a couple resources for you to help in planning for your event, whatever that event may be. All of these resources that I note can be found in our community resources page. First, our Getting Started Guide for Communities is a great place to start to think about your approach, or the audience you want to reach, and how might you reach them with the support of other community partners. We have a Coaching the Conversation Guide, which is a little bit older but still has relevant tactics and ideas for coaching small group conversations. Over the years, we've gathered tips for facilitating and teaching about the Conversation Project, not just from our team, but from hundreds of leaders like you in communities all over. This guide shares information on messaging, top things to think about, stories you can use to get your points across, and other examples. We have a presentation checklist that was co-created by our team and the Conversation Project in Boulder to help you prepare and think about how to make this a successful event. Lastly, one of the best ways to prepare, we encourage you to use our guide and have the conversation with someone who may speak for you someday. This is a great opener to any workshop to show that you've done this yourself. We have some standard agendas that you can also use. Today, I'll go through what we cover in a typical 60 or 90-minute workshop. It's super important to note, though, if you only have 15 minutes or less, you can absolutely still whet someone's appetite and spark curiosity for learning more. Use whatever time you have to share the importance of these conversations. We also have longer 90+ minute agendas for those of you seeking to go deeper in your community and wanting to train others. You can host your own Train the Trainer event that builds on what I'll share today. Here's a sample of our 60-minute agenda. I'll I'll show you later where this all lives on our website. You can see we break the hour, or 90 minutes, into topic area to tackle, and we suggest timing for each section. I'll walk you through this today. The first two sections up here help you plan out your intro. Here it is zoomed in a little bit. We encourage you to spend a few minutes introducing why you're bringing advanced care planning, conversations, or the conversation project resources here to your region or community. Set the stage as you welcome folks to the event, whatever it may be, whether it's in person, over webinar, Zoom, whatever platform you decide to use. After setting the stage, the rest of the agenda matches up with our standard slide deck that we have for you to use and adapt as you wish. I'll walk you through our standard slides, but before I do, here are a few tips for hosting a workshop or conversation groups. I can't emphasize this first point enough. Make sure you have thought about what matters to you and have talked about that with someone important in your life. You can share how this went, or you can share a personal story about an experience with someone at the end of their life that you've had. I share my personal story about what we went through with my mom to emphasize why this is so important and near and dear to my heart. Stories are at the heart of this work. They help you connect, as I'm sure you know. Research has shown us that positive stories are the biggest motivational factors to draw folks in. Try to open with the positive rather than gloom and doom of what happens when you don't have these conversations. You certainly can bring those other stories in later, but think about aspirational and motivational first. Next, these workshops are meant to be interactive. We have people spend quiet time to think, then time to turn and talk to a neighbor. We then have them open up and talk in small groups and with the group at large. For virtual events, you can use breakout rooms if you have the technology. If not, no worries. The chat function works really well as well. Some have told us it's actually easier for folks to talk on video rather than face-to-face. If you're hosting an in-person meeting, make sure the space is cozy, quiet, and if possible, use roundtables so folks can feel a bit more intimate. Make sure you're not springing this topic on folks and don't call people out. Ask for willing volunteers. Emphasize throughout that they can pass or opt out if they're not comfortable. You really want your space to be a safe space for sharing. If family members attend, offer that they split up as they may not be ready to share their wishes with each other at an event. But if they want to sit together, by all means, let them. At the start, make it clear what you're planning. You want to make sure that what you're covering and what you're not covering is well known, so folks aren't surprised at the event. And at the start of the session, kick it off with some ground rules to help all agree not to go down the rabbit hole on controversial topics, such as politics or religion, and instead agree to focus on listening and practicing having conversations. No judgment, all wishes and ideas are valid. This is personal. Make sure you note that you or your group has no stake in what someone's wishes are, as long as they're talking about them. Next, some members might want to bring in state-specific experts on advanced care planning or documentation. Think about whether you want to do this now and plan for this. Lastly, consider a second session. Many groups have shared with us that 2 sessions are better than just 1 to help prompt action after the first session. You can ask how the conversation went at the second one. If you don't have that ability, no worries. So hopefully that was some helpful framing and context before I go into the meat of the workshop. I'll share some more tips later with you. Now I'm going to walk you through some of our standard slides I noted that we have for you. Please adapt these, mold them to whatever works for you and especially what works for your audience. Adapt the ideas we share, add images or materials from your own state, whatever will resonate with those at your event, we want you to consider this your template to help you get a jump start. Use all of the slides, use one or two of the slides, change them up, keep them the same. You get the gist, whatever works for you. Just to note, the slides start here on our sample agenda, starting with introductions. You can start with a welcome and a thanks. Give the group an outline of what's going to happen. Let them know over the next X amount of minutes, you are going to enter territory most people do their best to avoid. We will think and talk together about our wishes for care now and through the end of our lives. Tell them you'll be introducing the Conversation Project's free Conversation Starter Guide, which is designed to help them get started on having a conversation with those important to them, and share what you hope they will leave with. Less anxiety about starting a conversation about what matters to them, some tips and tools for initiating a conversation, and a commitment to express their wishes and engage others in expressing theirs. If there's going to be a follow-up session, explain that now, and then you can give the details at the end of the session. This is where you let people know who you are and why you are motivated to share the Conversation Project. As I noted before, personal positive stories help connect to the audience. Next, you want to find out who is in the room or on the line and create a comfortable setting for sharing. Give them time to chat and share their stories in pairs or threes. A rule of thumb for any facilitator is to get people talking right from the start to help set the tone for sharing. Help them get to know others and support them to be open and talking. Have each person spend 1 or 2 minutes to share their story. Consider offering 1 or 2 of these 3 sample prompts and let them know when time to switch is. It's short, but it's very powerful. There may be some hesitation at the start, but typically once they start, they will not want to stop talking. Since it's often hard to get the group to stop, think ahead as a facilitator on how you'll bring the group back together. We are now here at the TCP overview in the agenda, TCP meaning the Conversation Project. If you can, try to spend no more than 10 minutes on this so you can concentrate on the meat of their time on further interaction and discussion. You can use this video clip here to give an engaging introduction to the Conversation Project. Depending on time and audience, this can also be good pre-work for a call, a class, or an event that you can send out ahead of time. In this clip, Diane Sawyer shares how Ellen Goodman started the Conversation Project and shares the story and experience of the Jennings family. The father and the daughter talked about everything except what matters most to each of them through the end of their life. It shows the family having a conversation together. We make a note after watching the clip that we know that not every family looks or acts like the Jennings family, but we know that talking and listening to each other matters. You can download the video first, or you can link to it on the internet. Here we share that the Conversation Project is a national public engagement campaign dedicated to assuring that everyone's wishes for care through the end of life are understood and respected. We use this slide to emphasize why this matters. Discussing our values and wishes can bring us closer to people. And talking with important people in our lives and our healthcare team creates that foundation of a care plan that's built on what's important to us that will be available when the need arises. Here's where you can emphasize that you have no preference on the type of care people want or don't want, as long as they are talking to those that matter about those preferences. Don't forget, when you are encouraging people to have conversation, it's good to emphasize that listening, the second part of a conversation, which tends to be forgotten, is equally important. Here we encourage folks to embrace being quiet, turning off their inclination to react, respond, or problem solve, which brings in our own biases. This is critically important. Encourage participants to acknowledge what someone is saying when they have these conversations by leaning into those thoughts, feelings, and what matters to the person in front of them. This slide can show that together we believe we can transform how we live until the end, one conversation at a time. Our message here is that we also know not everyone is given equal opportunity for a good life. We've seen the inequities and racial disparities that COVID laid bare. Not everyone has the luxury or the privilege to think about a good death when they are struggling to live a good life, put food on the table, worrying about finances and cost of treatment, and simply living in peace, not just dying in peace. Part of our work is to ensure everyone is reached, listened to, and respected. We don't want to create further inequities of care at the end of life. Next, you can introduce the Conversation Project website and our free downloadable resources to folks using this slide. Emphasize our resources and our flagship Conversation Starter Guides are free. You can purchase large quantities or you can print at home. These guides are designed to help get folks started. As a note, these updated guides were refreshed and released in 2021 after months of research to ensure they are appropriate and approachable for larger and more diverse audiences than we'd been originally reaching. And many of the guides are available in multiple language translations. We welcome any new language translations and encourage anyone to let us know if they are willing to translate these for use by others. We also have a personal workbook for anyone who has been diagnosed with a serious illness and a 2-page guide for all of us on being prepared in the time of COVID-19. Both were created with Ariadne Labs. And on our blog section of our website, you can find a plethora of personal stories by folks who have felt moved enough by this topic to share their experiences. We highly recommend that you show one of our humorous short videos here to showcase the types of videos that the Conversation Project has to help folks jumpstart these conversations. After the video, we like to note that we are not making light of death, but rather making the topic more lighthearted and accessible, so it's not all gloom and doom. This and other videos helps bring some humor and help ease the gravity of the topic. Okay, so you now have some options for introducing the Conversation Project to your group. The intro length will depend on how familiar folks are with the Conversation Project and with our resources. Now we are at the core part of the agenda. In this next part, we ask participants to take off any professional hat that they may have brought and put on their personal hat, so to speak, to get ready to dive in more deeply into our Conversation Starter Guide personally. You can give folks a quick stretch break to kind of help them transition. And this next part, we will ask folks to quietly reflect and then share some of their thoughts with others. You'll emphasize that the conversation starts with you. Though our intentions are good, we really shouldn't be asking someone else what their wishes are if we haven't taken a little time to think about and articulate what our wishes are. In doing this reflection for ourselves first, we really can gain some insight into the challenges and the opportunities and blessings that are part of having the conversation. I'll walk you through some key points, but don't forget, detailed talking points are included in the slides that you can access on our website. Here, you'll tell them how this will work. They'll be given prompts to think quietly about what they may want personally. Then they'll be given time to share in small groups, and then together in a large group report out. Encourage them to give current answers in their current mind, body, and state as of today. People have said to us, I don't know if I'll be in a car accident or what health condition I may have. And that's what this is all about. We cannot predict every possible scenario or a future state. But what we can do is talk about what you want now. I'll give an example. A colleague of mine shares that her husband started answering these questions in the future as if he were in his 80s and with Alzheimer's. She said, that's great for later, if that's the case, but I need to know what your answers would be now. Should something unexpected happen to you and I need to make decisions on your behalf? Then agree on some ground rules. We provide some examples here. You'll then jump right into the guide. We include screenshots of the Conversation Starter Guide and ask folks to open up the guide if they have it in their hand and you're in person, or click on a link to an e-version of the guide if you have that ability. Ask them to go to step 1. You can walk them through this page and then have them settle in, close their eyes if you think this is helpful, and have them answer this question. Read the question aloud and give them a few minutes to think about it, and then write it down. You will then ask them to turn and share. If they are comfortable, share their "what matters to me" statement with their neighbor, or they can chat it in on video calls. Once folks have some time to chat with their neighbor, you can then share these examples of what we've heard over the years. Feel free to add your own. It's really great to emphasize that there are no right or wrong answers. This is personal to everyone. We use this Wordle to emphasize the most frequent answers we've heard over the years. Note there's nothing medical or clinical about it. You can also open it up here to ask if anyone wants to share their statements with the group. This next section of the Conversation Guide is all about planning your talk. Having your say in healthcare is more likely if you share how you feel about certain situations that could arise now or in the future. This part of the guide is set up with questions and answers on a simple sliding scale to help folks see and share where they may fall on a spectrum of possible answers. Again, no right or wrong. A woman shared with me that she and her husband did this together, each on their own guide. She had filled in all the circles, all to the extreme left or right, and she had notes scribbled for each answer. Her husband filled in the circles all down the middle with nothing else. They then shared them with their daughter, who said, "Dad, this is great, but it doesn't help me. Tell me more." This is exactly what the guide should do. It should help jumpstart the conversation. In the workshop, you'll give everyone about 5 minutes, time depending, to look at the questions and see where they would place their answer along the scale. Have them mark it down and have them stop at step 3, start talking. Folks often don't want to write in their guide if they think this is their only copy, so if you can have 2 per person, that could be great. If not, remind them that they can print a fresh one off of our website. Just encourage them to mark it and write it down during the workshop. After 5 minutes or so, you can have a couple options. You can ask them to turn and talk with their neighbor and share how it went, what it was like, what they noticed, and then give them a few minutes to talk together. Then you can gather the group back up. Or if you have limited time, after 5 minutes of self-time, check in with them as a group to see how it went, what it was like, what they noticed, and you can ask if anyone was willing to share with a large group how it went. So now that they have something to tell someone, we ask them to make a plan to talk to someone or someones. You'll ask them to flip to step 3, start talking, and fill in who they want to talk to, where they might want to talk with that person or people, and where they might be comfortable, but also where those people might be comfortable talking. And then when would be a good time to talk. If you have time, have them to start to fill this in. Next, we talk about when to have the conversation or conversations. We suggest people have a conversation over time, early and often, sooner rather than later, not during a crisis in the ICU. I share a story of a community leader who once said to me that the conversation about not drinking and driving shouldn't happen for the first time at a DUI checkpoint, just like the conversation about care wishes shouldn't happen for the first time in the ICU. I really love that framing. If you have brief stories about sharing the conversation, whether it's humorous or touching, this is a really good point to insert them if you have time. For example, under major life events, I share that we initiated this conversation with my son when he was going off to college. A woman at one of our events shared that her husband was adamantly against her talking about this. But when she was turning 60, he asked what she wanted as a birthday gift, and she said, "All I want is to talk about our wishes for care." And he gave it to her. Perhaps someone in your family just got a diagnosis of a serious illness. Well, you now know what the situation may be, so now's the time to talk about it. The same with COVID. It gave us a scenario that could happen. So talking about what you may or may not want, given that at the moment, is the time to do it. Invite people here to share their thoughts, comments, and concerns after they have made their plans, or what they have been learning as they have been listening to others at the event. We actually get a huge amount of sharing when we make this really interactive, so play with it, and really you can bring in your best facilitating hat to help them walk through this with others. Have some fun with it. Often it's easier for folks to share with total strangers as a warm-up to sharing with those important in their own lives. So all of this is well and good, but the biggest question we get is how to bring this up with others. So point them to this page of icebreakers in our conversation starter guide that can help them. You can point out one or two of your favorites or share with others not on here. So one of my favorites is sharing something like, "Hey, I just attended this workshop and it got me thinking. I'd like to share my thoughts about what matters to me with you." We use this slide here to show that one of the best ways to start is by talking about a healthcare proxy first. Proxy framing can really be a softer entrance regarding who would speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. Some folks can handle this idea of an accident or something that they will recover from better. Or you could talk about how COVID showed us that really at any time we may need someone to speak on our behalf. Or you may choose to use another one of our videos to show rather than tell people that choosing a proxy is a great way to start a conversation. This again is a video that brings humor and touching entry into starting the conversation. If you have some time, you could offer people a chance to practice their opening gambit with others in this group. You can use this slide to help set the stage for that. If you want to include information about any of these topics here and be prepared with state-specific information, you can insert them here into your agenda. If you won't be addressing these things, come prepared with an idea of who to point people to, perhaps a local estate attorney or a doctor that might be able to answer these questions people may have after the session. Below and in the next 4 slides are stories we share that you can use to illustrate key points within our conversation guide. A reminder, all of the stories I will share now are in our slide deck and our guide on tips, so don't worry, you'll be covered. No matter what the role is, make sure the role you want to play is known. Whether you want someone else to decide what's best, or if you want your wishes to be followed completely without stray, make sure this is known to those who may have to make decisions on your behalf. A woman at one of our workshops noted she really wanted her adult kids to decide what kind of care she would receive, and for them to make whatever decisions that brought them peace. We said to her, this is the conversation she needs to have with them, to tell them this wish, so they aren't left wondering what their mom would have wanted. Katie Butler, an author, wrote a letter to her family laying out specifically what she would want and not want should she be diagnosed with dementia and were unable to make her own care decisions later. Next, we talk about what kind of care you want to receive. We emphasize to give current answers. As I said before, a reminder that there is no one way to discuss every hypothetical scenario that might come up. We talk about home often, and home is not always feasible. Probe for what's important. We hear from many people that my grandmother or my mother said the only thing she wanted was to die at home, and we just weren't able to do that. We know that it isn't always medically, financially, or physically feasible, and that it can be important to learn more about what home means. So probe a little. Does the person you're caring for have a pet they want to see? Are they afraid no one will visit them? What are the values behind home that are most important to incorporate? We share the story of Nana and her cat. One of our leaders' grandmothers noted she wanted to die at home, but when the family unpacked a little bit about why that was the case, Nana said she really just wanted to be sure to have her cat by her side. Next, be wary when people say, "I want the whole enchilada," or "pull the plug." There are plenty of folks who think they've had a conversation. "Oh, if I ever get like that, pull the plug," or "make sure you give me the whole enchilada." That comes up an awful lot, and that isn't actually very helpful information when people are talking with each other. So encourage people to share a little bit more about that. Maybe you say something like, "It sounds like you're worried about receiving too little care. Is that right? Tell me more." The scale questions can be really helpful here. This one is all about what role you want those that may be involved in your care to play, whether it be a friend, a family, or a loved one. Ask the person you think will be your proxy if they will and can honor your wishes. If not, you may want to find another proxy, and that is okay. Our proxy guide has really good tips for this and has details on the Just Right story and the church friend story in it. The gist of these stories, they're all about finding the right person for you. Next, tell more than one person. If you have a large family or multiple people who will want to be involved with your care at the end of life, it can make a big difference to keep folks in the loop. Not everyone needs the full details, but at the very least saying something like, "Hey, Susie's in charge if I ever need someone to make healthcare decisions on my behalf. We've talked about what I want, and I hope you all will support her." That can go a really long way. We're hoping to avoid what we call the seagull effect, the out-of-town sibling who doesn't know what their parent may want, who swoops in and dumps all over the carefully made plans of those who are right by the parent's side and know what the parent wants. Another thing we want to be aware of and caution folks about is family or caregiver bullying. A family member at a workshop in Florida once told us that she realized that she and her siblings had been imposing their wants and needs on their father instead of really listening and following what he wanted. He had a recent health episode that she shared with us and said they thought it would be best dealt with at the ER. They made him go to the ER even though he repeatedly said he did not want to go back to the hospital. While they did this certainly out of a place of love, it was against their father's wishes, and she felt that. Lastly, invite others to share their wishes with you. This doesn't need to be a one-way conversation from you to them. Encourage others to think about their wishes as well. We had a woman in Washington State who dubbed her husband Eeyore. He was always gloom and doom, not wanting to talk about his own wishes. So she said, "Okay, dear, here is what I will do for you then. Tell me if this is what you want. If not, please tell me otherwise." That was an excellent jump starter for their conversation. This is the opportunity to strengthen relationships. These are very loving conversations and don't have to be serious. Over and over, we hear that these conversations weren't as scary or sad as people thought they might be. They can be funny and loving. And they also take place over multiple conversations. Emphasize to your audiences, if you don't get into all the details the first time around, keep going. So we're towards the end of the workshop now. Here we encourage folks to take this forward and leave the event with these actions to commit to. Complete the guide. Pick a person to start a conversation with and talk with them. Get your proxy and those wishes in writing and share this with others. Make a plan to follow up with your attendees if you can, or host another event to have folks share how it went. So it's great to end with this letter. Either you can read it out loud or we have it in video version. I have to warn you, it's a tearjerker, so practice reading this first out loud before the event. Or you can end with the proxy video I mentioned earlier. You can end the event with humor. This is another great video to end with, especially if you have a healthcare audience. This can also be found on our website. It's a wonderful and beautiful story, a great way to end a session with healthcare providers. Always share your contact information if you can, as there may be other champions wanting to work together. Okay, so that is the full Conversation Starter Workshop and slide deck, so you have all of this available for your own use. I just have a couple more slides to share with tips. If you want to pause to take a break, stretch, grab a drink, please do so. And we're back. Here are some other things to think about as you organize your event. Remember that most of the work is done before the event actually happens, so taking time to think through this now will free you up and allow you to really enjoy the event itself. First off, when and where to host. It's critical to think about what days and times may be the biggest draw for the types of community members that you are actually hoping to reach. Perhaps it's after or before working hours, or not hosting an event on a religious or a local holiday. And if you can, think about bringing the event to them. What type of setting may be the most comfortable and convenient for them? For example, do they need to jump on a long bus ride to get to your venue? Will they be intimidated by the venue if it's in a clinical setting? Those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. Next is support. This can't be underestimated. Think about who you could team up with to provide help, such as providing space for your event. Perhaps a library or a senior center could do that. Think about who might be able to provide materials, like a law firm may provide photocopies in return for a mention at your event. Or the all-important food. Think about Panera or another local food establishment. Maybe they'll provide some in-kind support for your in-person event. Although for those virtual events, I do know of groups that had food delivered to folks at their homes right before a virtual event, so they could still have treats for breaks. Talk about innovation. Next up to think about is recruitment. Don't forget to plan out how you'll get the word out so you have people actually show up at your event. Next, understand your audience. Are you showing up at an existing Chamber of Commerce meeting, as an example, as a surprise guest, or is this a well-advertised event on advanced care planning? If people aren't expecting this, you'll need to adjust your framing to ease them in. Cultural considerations also, I really want to point out and emphasize here, are so critical to think about ahead of time. Be curious and bring cultural humility to this work. Maybe reaching folks through a faith-based or other trusted community organization is the best way to go. Many people in our communities, Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color, have suffered past and current harm in the healthcare system and may have a very valid distrust of the system and the care they may or may not receive at the end of life. Listen, learn what their pain points may be, and think about co-designing events with community members themselves. Don't push conversations if people are not ready for them. More on this can be found in our Getting Started in Communities guide under Approach. This second to last point here, start small and think big. We encourage you to test it out with a small group of friends or peers who would be open to you practicing. See how it goes and adjust your message and event accordingly. Lastly, follow up to see what support folks may need to take action after your event to show them that you care. We have evaluations to help you collect feedback on your event and to help participants take action. We also have these commitment cards. They're one part fill out and share with the event coordinator, and one part take home reminder. We've learned a lot over the years and have adapted our messaging and events accordingly. Some key messages that you may wish to consider during your events are listed here. First, when presenting, use more inclusive language, stories, and imagery. For example, use gender-neutral language, siblings rather than brother or sister, and examples reflective of more LGBTQ experiences. Next up, don't assume that everyone has a loved one. Instead, broaden this term to use those who matter to you, which could be a loved one, a friend, a faith leader, etc. We have a lot of solo agers out there, so we want to be respectful for that. Next, be careful when talking about family. Use family of choice versus family of origin. The second point that we've learned is really to help your message resonate with wider audiences, emphasize conversations, why talking and conversations matter. Shifting from the conversation to a conversation or multiple conversations. We know this often takes place over many sittings. Don't imply that it has to be all done at once. We actually joke that we should have been named Conversations Project with a capital S. Second up here is we emphasize the concept of preparedness and what I want and how to talk about it. The last point, emphasize empathy and no judgment. Don't come with a you should do this type of plan. The third and last one up here is contextualize for the moment. Recognize change in context due to COVID, the uncertainty, social distancing, telehealth, etc., and weave this or anything new in the world into your event. Additional tips can be found in this tips for facilitating and teaching about the Conversation Project Guide, which is on our community resource page. And just a reminder, if you are looking to do more than just one event and want to spread this across your personal, social, and community more intentionally, this free Getting Started Guide for Communities walks you through 4 steps to help you take action. Use bits of it, use all of it, whatever helps you move this forward. Don't be intimidated by the number of pages in this guide. It's just filled with ideas that you can take or leave. We go deeper into how to approach this work. We offer up a framework and 10 questions to help get you started, and we share lots of examples from individuals and groups who are already doing this across the globe. We also share a sampling of other helpful resources that are out there. All of what I shared today can be found here on our Get Involved tab under Community Resources. All of the ready-made resources I noted, as well as many others to get started, to host an event and promote your message, can be found on this page. Also, just take some time to check out the resources we have specific to faith and healthcare settings. You can also sign up for our newsletter, community calls, and discussion group. Any questions? Just ask. We are here to help you. And tap into an existing peer support group that we have across the US and globally of others that are spreading the Conversation Project across their communities. We call them Conversation Project Champions and are so proud to now add you to our list of champions as well. Join our private Facebook discussion page where a discussion is happening now. Ideas are being shared by individuals like you with a whole host of organizations that really are here to help support each other. You can also add your pin to our Champions map. Both of those are found on our Get Involved page. And lastly, follow us, share with us, and tag us on social media via Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I know this is a ton of information, But hundreds of people have been facilitating these sessions and adapting them to their own setting. So remember, you don't have to do it exactly how I laid it out here at all. We just wanted to give you an overview of how it might go. And that's a wrap. I hope this helps to get you started. We are so excited to be part of your journey. Thanks for joining us.